So welcome once again, and my name is Muka Makuntaman. I am a trainer at AFRINIC, and we are going to talk today about how to perform an IPv6 infrastructure audit. And this is something that I've been wandering around for quite a while. Like some of you must have gotten the email that I sent. It's one of those things. Every single time you read some book or some blog post around how to deploy IPv6, they always say, "Oh, you must audit your network. You must do an audit of the network." But when you actually get down to do it, it's like there's very, very little information. So we thought that we would try and solve this problem. And so what are we going to cover today? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to understand the why. Why do we need to do an infrastructure audit? What's the reason? And in the grand scheme of things, where does auditing fall in the timeline? Thereafter, we shall examine the step-by-step guides and the tools, right? How do you actually do it? If you go to the office tomorrow and there's a router in front of you, there's a firewall in front of you, what are the steps you're going to take to ensure that this firewall supports determine whether it supports IPv6 or not? And then finally, I'm going to walk you through a demo of a tool that we are trying to create to make this easier for all of our members. And you guys are going to be the first to see us demonstrate it live. And then finally, we shall end up with questions and answers and ask me anything about IPv6. So the very first thing we want to do is to say, why do we need to audit in the first place, right? Now, as some of you might know, my team and I, we've been going around all over the continent teaching people how to deploy IPv6 networks. So in 2017, feeling quite frustrated with the low level of IPv6 deployment in Africa, we sent out a survey to find out from the people that we had trained what was the thing that was holding them back. And the number 4 reason that people gave that's holding them back is legacy equipment. They were not sure if your equipment already supports IPv6. Well, I got a question here. Does it mean that those of us who have not any previous training can log out? Not at all. We are not going to be talking about IPv6 per se. So you just take in, there's something you can benefit from here. And when you do an IPv6 training, we're going to be doing further webinars and e-learning. This is going to come in handy. So you can just take it. You will learn something. So what we found is that the number 4 reason that people give for having not started IPv6 is that they have lots of legacy equipment. But in order to determine that an equipment is legacy, that is, it will not support IPv6, you need to first do an infrastructure audit, right? And that's why we set out to say, let's make it easier and give people some kind of a tool and step-by-step guidance to do an IPv6 infrastructure audit. And so the question is, why do we need an audit in the first place? Why not just dive in and start deploying? You see, because smart engineers do not fly blind. Right? An infrastructure audit enables you to find out what devices on our network are actually capable of supporting IPv6. You want to know that information ahead of time before you start deploying, okay? And there's important reasons. There's a couple of reasons why this is important. Let's see if you guys can empathize. So, now, there's a poll. Which one of these reasons on your screen do you think auditing is going to help you with when you actually go into an IPv6 deployment project? 30 seconds. Which one of those reasons? Good. Will it help you accurately determine deployment costs? Will it help you cut down on deployment time? Will it help you reduce the risk of legacy devices? Or is it all of the above? Good. Yes. 81% of the votes are in. All right, all right, all right. I can see more people voted in this poll, which means some people found the hidden poll window. Good, so let's stop the poll now and see the results. So the results says, of course, the vast majority of people say all of the above, and you are all correct, because you're all correct. Now, if you do an infrastructure audit, it enables you to determine accurately your deployment costs, because right now, every single equipment in your network falls in one of three categories. A, it is either ready to support IPv6 right now. You don't need to do anything. You're fine. Category B, it is not ready, but you can do an upgrade. Mostly, maybe software, or maybe a minor hardware upgrade, maybe like say some RAM or some line card, and enable it to be able to do IPv6. And there's a third category. There are some devices that just cannot support IPv6, and there's nothing you can do, not in software, not in hardware. Of course, those devices, when you're actually, in terms of project management, they have to be replaced, and therefore they're going to cost money. So you don't want to start an IPv6 project without knowing exactly which devices might need to be replaced, because it's going to cost money. Also, the devices that need to be upgraded, that is a task, a key task on the deployment project. So you want to know that ahead of time. Secondly, it cuts down on deployment time. Now, we've seen lots of people who have just started doing an IPv6 deployment, and then they got somewhere and got stuck because they did not do an audit. Why? Because suddenly you find out, oh, there's this big bad firewall on which everything depends, and it does not support IPv6. But you know, we've already done 20% of the work, and then we are stuck at this equipment. If you had done an infrastructure audit earlier, you would not have this problem. So the time to actually complete the project, IPv6 project, would be reduced, and the risk of getting stuck because of devices that do not support IPv6, we call them legacy devices, is going to be eliminated. So that's the reason why we do an infrastructure audit, to accurately determine deployment costs, one, two, to cut deployment time, and thirdly, to reduce the risks of legacy devices sabotaging the project. Now, in terms of where IPv6, where the auditing sits in the deployment timeline, you can see that after you start the IPv6 project initiation, whether it's because your boss comes in and says, okay, we are doing it today, or you and a couple of other engineers sit and say, we want to do this, and where the end goal is, that IPv6 is deployed, somewhere, if you're a smart network engineer like you all are, you're going to want to do an audit first, because lots of the tasks that you're going to do in the project, lots of the costs that you're going to spend in the project, some of them will depend upon the output that comes out of your infrastructure audit. So this is the key place. You want to do it as soon as you can after project initiation, okay? And so now that we've talked about the why do you need an infrastructure audit, let us delve into how you actually do it. So there's lots of equipment out there where people claim, oh, we are IPv6 ready, right? IPv6 ready. And I always use this character. For those of you who are fans of Batman, this character is Two-Face, right? Two-Face. There's one side that is good and there's one side that's really, really evil. There are lots of equipment that have some nice label on them, or maybe the manufacturer puts on their website, oh, we are IPv6 ready. But beware of these devices, because when we talk about IPv6 readiness, it's not, it's just not a simple, oh, this thing is IPv6 ready. The more complex the equipment, the more nuanced IPv6 readiness is. I'll give you a story. In my house, the CPE in my house, the provider said that it has been IPv6 ready for the last 5 years. And guess what? I still don't have IPv6 at home. Why? Because there are certain features that I need to turn IPv6 at home that are not ready in this equipment. So simply because you can configure an IPv6 address on the equipment does not mean that it's IPv6 ready. So for complex equipment, you determine IPv6 readiness on a per future level. Is it BGP ready for IPv6? Is it OSPF? Is it BFD? Is it first hop redundancy? Is that okay? So we are going to walk you step by step how you determine the features to audit, and what standards do you audit against, and what tools are there to help you. So be very careful. Simply because some vendor claims that it's IPv6 ready, you want to be careful. And that's why we're doing this webinar, so that you will have a bit much more, you have more tools at your disposal to determine how truly IPv6 ready a piece of equipment is. And we're talking from routers to firewalls, to hosts, to servers, to different applications, okay? So what are the steps? So the very first step when you're doing your auditing is obvious, is you want to list all the devices on the network. But okay, start with routers. The obvious ones is the hosts, because ultimately it gets down to hosts. If you're an enterprise network or you're a campus network, you want to look, what kind of hosts do I have? Are they Windows hosts, Linux hosts, Mac OS hosts, or are they smartphones, Apple iOS, or Android devices? You want to list these devices. So what are the types of routers? What are the firewalls? What are the servers? What are the load balancers? You want to list every single one of them, because you're going to be auditing each and every one of them. And then, secondly, the second thing you want to do is you want to determine the required features. So you have to ask yourself, for a router, what features do I need to be ready for IPv6? Is it routing? Am I doing BFD? Is it BGP support for IPv6? Is it ISI support for IPv6? That is something you need to determine. If it's a server, what are the functionalities, IPv6 functionalities that I need to know whether they are supported in my device? And then, after you list your devices and you determine the required features, the next thing is going to do research. You have to research. Does this device that is in front of me, does it actually support this feature that I need for my network deployment? And at the end of that, you can decide. You gather all of the information that you've researched to make a decision. Okay, this is ready, this is not ready, but can be made ready with an upgrade, software or hardware, or this, we just have to, throw it over the wall, against the wall, and buy something new. Now, so again, 4 key steps to auditing. List your devices, 1. 2, determine the required features for each device. And then for each of these features, you go and research the support in your device, and then you decide. So let's find out, which one of these do you think is the most challenging? I'm going to list, just look at them, and then I'm going to show you a poll. Which of these steps do you think is much challenging? So, good. You have a minute. Which of those steps do you think is going to be the most challenging, or do you consider to be the most challenging one? You've got a minute. Good. That's good. 20% of the people have voted. Great, we've got 50 participants in the house. Okay, 10 more people haven't voted. Okay. So if you have not voted, quickly vote so that we can get some useful information, so that we can target the content that we're going to develop towards you. Great. So 40 people have voted. So I'm going to end the poll.
It's 5 o'clock.
And let's see the results. So as you can see, the vast majority of the people, which is not what I would have thought, think that determining the required feature set for each device, that's the most challenging aspect. So I've got good news for you. We're going to help you. By the end of this webinar, you know exactly how to do that, okay? And after you determine the required features for each device, you will find that researching support for each feature is actually quite challenging. The last one, making the final decision, that is relatively easy, as we'll show you by the end of this. Good. So let's go into the auditing tools and how to make this whole process easier. A bit more details. Now, the very first step, obviously, like we just said, is that you need to know which devices in your network need to be audited, okay? You need to know which devices in your network need to be audited. So, as a network engineer, where do you think you should get this information from? Where can you get the information about the devices in your network that need to be audited? Where do you usually get it from? Good. Okay. %78% of the people have voted. Go ahead and finish voting so that we can see what the practice you people are actually doing out there. It's amazing. Yeah, keep it up. All right, so I'm going to end the poll and let's see the results. So yes, as you can see, most of you say, okay, this information comes from your network management system. This is correct, because if you're running a network and you're doing it properly, you have some kind of network management system that, you know, has information about what routers, what firewalls, literally every single device in your network. And if you don't have an NMS, there is at least some network documentation. It could be a network diagram or a wiki page that shows, you know, what devices are on the network. For a very, I mean, obviously this is for a very small network. Active network scan. Now this is the most likely place where you actually do a network scan is where you have an eyeball network, like on a university campus where there's a hotspot, okay? You might want to scan to say, what are the kind of hosts that I have? So most of the infrastructure devices, servers, routers, firewalls, switches, access points, those should be either in documentation or in the network management system. Active scan should really only be for hosts. And quite frankly, there are some network management systems that can actually do that active scan for you periodically, and you have access to that information. Now, for those of you who set other source, can you please type in the comment, the chat window, what are the other sources that you guys have used? I'm just curious. Type in the chat window, those of you who say other sources for getting information about the devices to audit. Can you type in the chat window, what are the other sources that you guys use? Okay, someone says from vendors. Yeah. Someone says from vendors. All right. Good. So as you can see, the very first step is to what? List your devices. You actually want to know the device name, where it's located, your NMS, your documentation, and then someone says here, DHCP profiling. That is a good source of the things to scan, particularly for hosts, right? For host devices, okay? Now, so DHCP FIM is an example of active scan, vendors, DHCP profiling, your network management system, your documentation. Now, the very first step is, now that you have a list of all the devices, essentially, you go through each one of these and then determine the required features. Now, step 2. Now, you need to determine the required features for each of these devices. And this is what you people said in the poll that is going to be your biggest challenge. You know, everything in IPv6, in fact, everything about most of the protocols that are on the internet are defined in RFCs, requests for comments. There are literally thousands of them, in fact. There are more than 5,000 RFCs. For IPv6, there's probably 500 or so of them. And quite frankly, it is not feasible, especially if you don't already have some advanced training in IPv6, to start looking at RFCs. So one of the best documents I've seen to simplify this, to say, what feature do I need for each type of equipment? It's a document called RIPE 554. Some of you might know Jan Zos and Stefan Sander in the European region. So they created this beautiful document that tells for each kind of device, what are the requirements, what are the features that you need to be looking at, is that okay? And then some of this is also based upon the work of the National Institute of Standards in the United States Government Profile, which lists the different requirements for different types of devices, okay? Of course, there are hundreds and hundreds of RFCs. That will not be the first place I'd want to point you to. In fact, if I can point to one thing, one document that you should master how to use, is a RIPE 554 document. It's a large document. At the end of this webinar, we're going to share links to all of these things, okay? Don't worry, we'll share the links to you. Now, so these documents list all the features for routers, for firewalls, for hosts, for servers, etc. Now, one of the things I want to let you people know here, but I want to tell you guys here is this. Your device does not need to support all the features listed in any of these diagrams, because, you know, people go and see, oh my God, it says that I have to do, a router must support ISIS. It does not matter. If in your network today you don't use ISIS, then you don't care whether that router supports ISIS for IPv6, since you don't plan to use it, okay? You only care about the things that you currently support in IPv4, the equivalents in IPv6, or the things that you might need to run on IPv6 only network, okay? So do not worry about, oh my God, the document says that a router should support this feature, but mine doesn't. That's not a big problem. Now, the third step is, how do you research the feature support? Yeah, the document says your router should support the ability to announce a prefix in in BGP. Now, how do you determine for your specific device whether it can do that? Is that okay? Now, there are three main sources for this, right? I would say the easiest place where I'll typically start is the IPv6 ready program, IPv6 ready logo program. It lists all devices that have been tested in a lab, which means they're brought into a lab, connected up, and then tested under various conditions that would occur in the network for how well they support this specific feature. Now, of course, the reason I like the IPv6 ready logo program is because they also do interoperability testing. So it's not just enough that this DHCP server can give out addresses, but they also test: will a Linux client work with this DHCP server? Will a Windows client work with this DHCP server? And what are the results? Now, apart from that, most vendors have some kind of application or page on their website, which is called a feature navigator. So you can go for each kind of device, for each operating system, for each version, they will list all the features that they have implemented and tested. Of course, it is less trustworthy because, everyone loves their mother's own food. And then apart from that, if you can find data sheets for this device, maybe that came with the box, or you can find it in the vendor's website, you can also get this information in it. So ideally, you want to start from the first one, that is your most trusted source, and then work your way to the other two, okay? And then the final step is, how do you decide the status of each device? Now, the most important thing to do, remember what you've done is you've listed all the devices in your network. Then for each device, you listed the features that you need. You've gone ahead and researched. And then you have, for each one you've marked, okay, it's supported, it is not supported. Now, when it comes the time to make a decision, it's as simple as this. Filter all the features that are mandatory. Is that okay? And then you look upon the results of your research, and then you decide what is the status. The status really should be one of these four things. It could be IPv6 ready. It means that all your mandatory features are supported based upon your research. You can check that off. You're good. That device, you can start deploying IPv6 on it right now. You don't need to replace it. You don't need to upgrade software. You're fine. The next category is the device is not ready, but the software upgrade can make it ready. So you say software upgrade required, which means that as you start the IPv6 deployment project, you're going to assign someone. Your job is to update this device from version X to version Y. The third category, that is where money starts to come in, is where a hardware upgrade is required. Obviously, it's not every single device that you can do a hardware upgrade. Like your normal CPE, some small CPEs. You can't change your RAM, you can't change your hard drive space. So yeah. So sometimes a hardware upgrade is required. Maybe you just need more memory in order for it, or maybe some line card. And then the last and the worst category is this device does not support IPv6. It is completely legacy, which means the only way IPv6 is going to work is if you replace the device. Of course, this tells you that, at the end of your audit, all the devices that need to be replaced, what you need to do is that you need to put them in a budget for equipment to be replaced. And even if you're not doing IPv6 now, if you do an IPv6 infrastructure audit, you can already mark these devices so that the next time that your company is buying new equipment, you just make sure that it's going to support IPv6. So that when the time comes to actually deploy IPv6, guess what? It will already be marked as IPv6 ready. That is one of the important reasons why you want to do an infrastructure audit as early as possible. So, good. So we've got these tools. So you're looking at this, I'm sure, as I've been saying, going through this process, you're saying, well, I mean, what are the tools? I've just talked about the process. So far, I've talked about the process. I've referred to some documents or reference documents. Still, what are the tools you need to use? Well, we have created some kind of what we call an audit assistant. It's simply some kind of, a spreadsheet with some formulas in it to help you make this process simpler, right? And I'm going to walk you through it. Now, this is the tool, right? And you guys are the first ones to have access to this tool and actually see us walk you through it, okay? As you can see, of course, at the end of the webinar, at the end of the evaluation feedback form, you're going to automatically have access to this tool, and most of the links I've talked about. So I'm going to walk you, if you go here to the bottom, the very first sheet is simply instructions. What you need to do, step-by-step instructions to actually use this tool, okay? And then in the second box, I have links to some very useful websites. I have a link to a Wikipedia page that lists the basic support of different operating systems. I have a link to the Cisco's Future Navigator. I have a link to Juniper's Future Navigator. I have a page to Microsoft's, MikroTik Router OS IPv6 support, and then also a link to the IPv6 Ready Program Approved list. And there's, if you look at the bottom here, for those who want to go into deep dark details, this is a list of all the RFCs, essentially the standards that describe each of the features, okay? Now, this is where you start to use the device. If you look here, I've already done the job for you. If you come in here, I already have a list of all the types of devices you might have on your network. Something is either a router or a firewall or a host or layer 2 switch, okay, firewall twice, or a CPE, if you're an ISP, or a mobile device, or a load balancer, or a server. Now, when we give you this tool, if there's a kind of device that you want, you'll be able to add it here, and then it's going to become part of the tool for you. Now, what we've done is that we've gone through all of the RFCs and the RIPE 554 document and all of the sources you can find on the internet in the textbooks. And we've categorized the most important features for different types of devices. So for example, if something is a host or a server, these are the features that you need it to be able to support. You want to be able to manually configure an IPv6 address on it. You want to be able to have an IPv6 address through what we call stateless address configuration. You want it to be able to get an address through DHCP version 6. And you also want it to be able to get DNS information through router advertisements. Now, if something is a router, these are the common features for any kind of router. Of course, today you have BGP that advertises. Okay, is everyone still seeing my screen? Is everyone following me? Because I see some people saying they can't see what I'm talking about. Is everyone seeing my screen? I am currently on the definitions tab. I was walking you through the definitions tab of the IPv6 audit tool. Yes, thank you very much. We can see. Thank you very much. So if something is a router, these are the common features that you expect it to support for IPv6. A router, you want it to be able to, if you do BGP for IPv4, you also want it to do BGP for IPv6. If you use OSPF for IPv4, you want it to do OSPF for IPv6. If you do authentication and security for IPv4, you want it for IPv6 as well. BFD, if you use RIP as a routing protocol, this is the equivalent. So we've listed, we can say pretty much this covers about 80% of the core IPv6 functionalities for routers that should be common to all routers, okay? Now, if you have a router that is at the edge of the network, by edge I mean is a router to which, if you're an ISP, customers connect to, like your browse, for example. These are the features that you should support. That is radio support, PPPoE, IP over Ethernet, you should be able to do IPv6 prefix delegation, radio support IPv4, version 6, it should support maybe a DHCP-v6 server, a relay agent, prefix delegation via radius. If you want to do a transition technique called 6RD, etc. So these are the various functionalities or features that you might need. Again, remember, like I said, you don't need every single one of these features. Okay? You don't need every single one of these features. And then for a CPE that you're going to give a client, for those of you who run ISPs, you want it to be able to configure router advertisement options. It should be a prefix delegation client, which means that the CPE should be able to get a prefix from the service provider that it uses on the network, simply because we don't have NAT. You're not supposed to be using private IPv6 addresses on networks anymore. And then these other ones really are transition mechanisms. And when I talk about transition mechanisms, as we all know, IPv4 and IPv6 are not compatible. Therefore, at some point in the future, you're going to need if you choose to run an IPv6 only network, you will need what we call a transition mechanism to make sure that even though your device is only IPv6, you can still access everything that is on IPv4. So there are various transition mechanisms. And when you start planning your IPv6 deployment project, you're going to have to determine one of them, and you will know exactly which feature you want to be supported on your CPE. And also if you're a load balancer. Now, this is the conclusion. This is, after you do your research, this is values that you use. And these are common operating systems. I've just put them here to make things easier for you. Of course, when we give you this sheet, you can always add different operating systems to it. And then one of the things I like to do is to identify the location. Okay? This device that you're auditing, what is its location in the network? Is it at the edge of the network, the internet edge? That is where you connect to the internet. Is it the one edge, like for MPLS? Is it in your core network? Is it in your distribution? Is it in the user access edge? Is it in the customer POP, data center, customer premise, internet exchange, etc., etc.? Those are different locations. And for those who are interested in the physical location, you can always change the city one. You can put Jos or Johannesburg or Dakar or Addis Ababa or Gondar or Nairobi or Dar es Salaam. You can put all of them there. And now, I have a tab here. You can just put your network diagram just so that, since you're going to be working on this with your team, if you have a network diagram, it's easy for people to reference the diagram and then go back as they're doing the audit. And then here, this is where the magic happens. This is the sheet that we've set up for you, and all you need to do is fill in the blanks. You fill in the name of your device here. You click here, you select the type. Is it a router, a firewall, a host, a switch? You select the location from here. You select the operating system from here. Then you put in the version, right? And then you select the feature. As you can see, if what you've selected from here is a router, you can go, oh, these are the things that a common router must support. You select, you can pick one, you can pick another one. So I want it, okay. So for example, I can pick OSPF3. I also want it to do, say, IS. This is just an example. And then one of the things you want to determine, is this feature mandatory or optional? And how do you determine this? And how do you determine this? If it is a feature that you currently use for your IPv4 network, then you want it to be mandatory. So for example, if you run, let's take an example, you're an enterprise network and all of the IP addresses are done through DHCP, then you might choose to say, for my server, the ability to do, what's the server? All the hosts in my network, for example, must be able to get an address through DHCP. You select it as mandatory. Now, this support is after you go and do the research, which I'm going to show you how to do that, then you can check it. You can check or uncheck, right? Now, then at the end, you can simply select and say, once you've evaluated all the features for a given device, then you can say, come and select what is the conclusion for that device. It is ready, it is not ready, but it can be made ready with a hardware upgrade, with a software upgrade, or both hardware and software upgrade, or it needs to be replaced. Now, obviously this sheet, so I noticed when some of you were registering for the webinar, you said you're looking for a template. In fact, this sheet is going to be a template. And what I expect to see is that, you guys as a team, you guys will get together, you do one together, and then and this is why I prefer you use something like Google Sheets, a shared document, because you don't want someone to download this on their laptop. You want it online so that several people can be working on it simultaneously, okay? So you can assign, this router 4 is for Matthew, router 5 is for Johan, router 6 is for Stephen, router 7 is for Willie, etc., etc. And so the bulk of the work is going to be your team filling in this sheet. And once you fill in this sheet, we have set up this audit report. Automatically, you will have everything set up for you here. You have a report, automatically generated report. Everything that is mandatory and what is the status. And this you can use either to convince your boss, or you can put it in the project, documents, etc. So now that is a tool. I've just walked you through the tool. Are there any questions? If you have a question, just type into the chat room before I walk you through an example. Yes, you will have the file after. You have the file. This file, you have access to this file. Again, I'm going to remind you, please do not download it as an Excel. Try and use it as a Google Sheet. Make it online, so that you and multiple people can share it. That's easier. Any questions? Okay. If no questions, let me just take us. Okay. Yes, someone says you can have the same device doing multiple functions. How is that represented? So that's a good question. And that's why I said when you do auditing, you audit at the level of futures, right? So for that same device, let's say a device, the different functions is, it is doing your radio server, and it is also, say, it is both a radio server and it does your load balancing, just an example. So you list that same device multiple times, but then the features, when you come here, features, you say, I want it, it's an edge, I want it radius, and then I want it as a load balancer. It's a load balancing feature, load balancer. I want it to balance V6 to V6. So Josephat, does that answer your question about a device doing multiple functions? Thank you. Any other questions before I go into an example of a sample audit sheet? All right. Now this is a sheet. This is just an example. So what I wanted to do was to in our test bed here at AFRINIC, we have these devices, and I just wanted to use one of them as an example to show you how we can do an infrastructure audit. But before I go into that, let me just show you the different. If you go at these instructions, I listed some useful websites. I just want to walk you quickly through these websites. So this is the IPv6 ready program. As you can see, it is, in fact, you can see the last device was approved, in fact, a few days ago, right? Dell EMC in the US, their PowerEdge product. It tells you the product classification as a host. So you can select, from which country, but more important, I would like to start from classification. Different classifications is a router, a client, a server, a mobile router, different classes of devices. You can find the vendor name Cisco, a test category, a core protocols, DHCP-v6, CPE router, etc., etc. You can also search by keyword. Okay, I'll show you an example of how we do this. Now, this is Cisco's. Let me look for the Cisco Feature Navigator. Okay, this is if you use a Cisco device, literally here, you can find for each device, for each platform, for each software version, you can see all the supported features are supported by Cisco. Like I said, remember I told you the easiest place to start is the IPv6 ready logo. I have a question from Antenna. In IPv6 support only radius attribute. What about how TACAS? Okay, I assume that he's talking about these features that I put in here. This is definitions. Remember, I've said that we've tried to put in as many of the features that we know from RFCs. If there's some specific feature that you currently use in IPv4, which is not here, when you have this file, you can always put it in here, and then it's going to appear on your audit worksheet. Antenna, Sawal, does that answer your question? Any feature that you don't see here, you can always add it. So, Antenna, does that answer your question? Give us a signal in the chat room if that answers your question. Okay, so I was going for, that's for Cisco, that is for Cisco Feature Navigator. Now, Juniper also has a feature explorer, which can, you can search by software or by multiple products or by software release, etc., etc. And these are tools that you're going to use when you're researching. Does this platform support this feature X? And then MikroTik, they don't have a very sophisticated feature explorer, but they have a page here of whatever, they have a wiki page that lists what it is that they currently support. Now, this is the RIPE 554 document I was telling you about. And as you can see, it tells you, in fact, you don't need to look at this because, in fact, I'm just putting it out there so that you know exactly, if you wanted to find out what are the requirements, different kinds of categories, you can go in here. But most of the information in this document, I have already put them into the audit tool. Yes, Anthony, yes, I was talking about Cisco. But I was saying that any feature, now this, okay, you just raised an important question. These features here are supposed to be independent of vendor, right? So for example, DHCP-v6 client is not Cisco or Juniper. These are the things that are defined within RFCs. Now, sometimes some vendors might have something, proprietary, but if you need it in your network, you can put it in here so that it appears on your audit sheet. Okay, someone is saying that most of the devices that we are running is Huawei. And how do you do that? That's a very good question. Whether you're using Huawei or ZTE, the features are, so Huawei devices, I haven't, if you look, I'm sure if you go to the Huawei website, as time goes, we're going to be improving this tool. We'll find out where is the Huawei equivalent page, right? Now, if you go to the IPv6 ready, for example, if you search Huawei here, for example, you can probably see Huawei, they will send some devices here for testing. As you can see, these are different Huawei devices, the routers, etc., etc. So the IPv6 logo program, it is vendor neutral. Vendors from all over the world. As you can see, you've seen HP, you've seen Arista, you've seen Cisco, you've seen Juniper. So that's why I recommend it should be the first place you start. Now, if you can't find, and I trust it because if it is here, it is because someone else apart from the vendor has taken it and put it up in the lab and put devices from other vendors. Because this is not just about testing whether it supports IPv6, but it's also testing that is it interoperable with other vendors. So if you put your Huawei router and a Windows machine, will they work for DHCP? The IPv6 ready logo program actually tests that, which is why I trust it. Okay. So this was just, okay, now this is the equivalent from the US government profile. You know, it tests, if something is a host, at least it must support those things, optional or mandatory. Again, most of these things have already been built into the tool that we're going to share with you, okay? And for those of you who are brave, you can always go into the RFC. The RFC is the ultimate standard, right? Every single thing that a node must support in order to be IPv6 compliant is listed in an RFC. So for example, it lists this one. But again, you don't need to go deep to this level because the RFCs are already referenced in the RIFE 554 document, which we have also included in the audit assistant. Good? So let me walk us through an example. So I was saying that what we want to do is we have a router in our test bed, right? And we are trying to see how IPv6 ready it is. So this is just an example that I've already filled in because I wanted to make things quite easy. So here I type in the name of the device. We call it MRU1 gateway. What type? It's a router, right? The network location is in the core of the network. Now, once you set a router here, I'd say you skip at least 10 lines and tick the next device. Let's say Johannesburg gateway, right? Oh, put it here. It is let's say it's another router at the edge of the network, at the one edge. And let's say I'm using Cisco iOS XR. Now, this is where you start to know the actual tools and the techniques. Now, because in order to find out the supported features, you need to know what software version this router is running. So how do I do that? In our case, I just go to Can you all see my screen? You can all see my screen? Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm logged into the router right now. So I can do a show version. Oh, logged me out. Good, I can do a show version. So obviously, if you're using a Juniper or Huawei router, you'll find the equivalent for show version, and you get that. So as you can tell from here, this is system. I see this. This is the system image, C to the 900. That is the version of the software, because this is what I am going to use on the vendor's feature Navigator software to find out what are the supported features for this platform, okay? Then I can go back here. As you can see, now I have this comment here, I've just put notes. Once you're doing your auditing, you use it in the same way. I've just put information about this router here. It's a C to the 9, this is the router platform. Now, I am going to, now for this, so, now, okay, what I didn't, now, this is the part I skipped. Now, since it is a router, I know that as a router, I must be able to assign manual addresses to each interface, right? So that's why I selected this manual address configuration. And because it's a router, I need to be able to announce my prefix. Therefore, I selected multi-protocol BGP with the IPv6 address family. That is over here on the router. Empty BGP. Okay, it's not here because I've already selected it. Then this was just pretend. I wanted to do DHCP v6 guard. DHCP v6 guard is simply does the same thing that DHCP guard does in IPv4. If it's a switch, for example, I don't want a rogue DHCP server. I want that feature. So a good way to do this is to say, look at your current configuration. What do you do in IPv4 today? Want to make that list in IPv4, that's what is currently running on your network. You simply come down to this list and find the IPv6 equivalent here, okay? If it's not here, you can always add it, okay? So I've just taken a couple of features. And then, obviously, I want to state, is it mandatory if it's a router, I don't want a router if it's not possible for me to manually configure an IPv6 address on its interfaces. So I say mandatory. It's a router, so I want it must be able to announce a BGP prefix, correct? It's a router, I want it to be able to do OSPF for my intra-domain routing. Now, DHCP v6 guard, if this router is at the edge, my internet edge, I don't need DHCP v6 guard because there is no host that's going to be connecting to that router directly. So there are two things. I could actually have left this out. I don't care about this. Or I can say it's optional. You would put optional if there's a chance that in the future, you might want to use this feature. Also, as a DHCP server, it's also optional. Now, prefix list, if it's going to be announcing a prefix to the internet, I want the ability to do prefix list so that I can filter what comes in and out of my network. Also, I want to be able to do what? It's mandatory to have route redistribution, etc., etc. Now, I'm going to show you how did I check this one, check and all of that. Now, because I know that this device is what? It's a Cisco device, Cisco iOS, right? I'm going to go to the Cisco Feature Navigator. I'm going to use this. I'm going to go to the Cisco Feature Navigator. Here. Now, so I can search by release, by platform, by feature name. So I can search, I can say, okay, I can keep going down. I can say select iOS, or when I select iOS, measure release. If I go back to my router, what can I do? It is 15.33. 15.33M. As you can see, that's it. So this is what I got. Platform, it is a 2901, right? And it is data IP base. So if you see here now, it lists every single feature that is supported on this router platform. But that's everything, every single thing. But remember, I am only interested in the IPv6 features. So what I can do is that I can filter by technology. I say type IPv6. And I say filter. And so you can see here, all the IPv6 supported features here that are listed here. So, as the services, or I can filter by feature name, just put IPv6. Yes, that's a longer list. So this tells you every single IPv6 feature on this router. So you simply look here, right? So I'd selected, if you go back to my audit sheet, I'd said OSPF v3. I can go here and look for OSPF IPv6 routing. See, this is routing. You see here, for example, it says IPv6 OSPF of IPv6. It is supported. That is why I marked this as checkbox. Okay? And so I will do that for each and every feature. I'm thinking, yes, that is a lot of work. Remember, the devil in auditing is in the details, right? And you only really care a lot about the features that are mandatory, right? Now, of course, I'll do it for this. I'll do it for each of these features. So each line, for each line. Remember, all of this is still about, it's still one, remember, it's still the same device, right? One device and several features, several features, several features. So this answers the question someone had, you know, a device can have multiple roles. This is how you switch. This is how we try to solve that in this tool, okay? Now that you've done, you do this for every single feature. Okay, one of the things I can do is I can look at the IPv6 ready logo. Let me say Cisco. Let me see type Cisco. What do I find? Update results. I want to look at their routers, only routers. So you can always find your device here. So of course, there's more than 50 here. Now I'm just going to pick one of these at random to show you. This is Cisco ASR 1002-X. Now, if you click on this, if you click on the ID, you see something interesting. But look at this very carefully. It tells you the dates on which it was tested, the core protocols, product name 16.0.2, it's a router, it's an aggregation services router. Now, it's interoperable. So these guys are saying they've tested this router. It works well with Brocade, it works well with HP, and for a host, it works with Oracle, Solaris, and it works with FreeBSD. And the target supporting functions, you can do multicast, MCU configuration, multiple physical interfaces. Okay, so it gives you the details of the tests for each network. Now, you do this for each of the features, for each device, and that's what I'm saying, it's not something you do alone. So the first time you guys do this, what I recommend is, you know, as a team, your entire team sits down, you list all the devices. You list one device, you skip 10 steps, you list another, you need a second device, skip 10 rows, list 10 rows, and all of that. And then for each device, you start listing the features, and then you can just copy this. And then you can assign, you say, Tom, you're doing gateway 1. Jerry, you're doing gateway 2. Muhammad, you're doing gateway 4, etc., etc. It's good to do it collaboratively. Now, you do this step on feature by feature, feature by feature, feature by feature. Now, how do you finally decide whether this device supports IPv6, is ready for IPv6 or not? So here's how we propose to do it. Because it's a spreadsheet, you can simply come here. Now, remember, you only care to determine absolute support. You filter. I want only the features that are mandatory. You see? For this device, it's listing only the features that are mandatory. And it's saying, you know what? For these devices, for this device, of the 5 mandatory features, 1 is not supported. I can't do prefix list. So what I can say here is what? Okay, first of all, it's not ready. It's definitely not ready. But the next thing I'll need to find out, is there a higher version of this software for this platform that supports the IPv6 ready? So for example, if you look, I'm using 13.5, 13.3, but it's possible that 13.4, 13.5 supports that feature. So I'll come here and select with the software upgrade, and I do the same thing for all of the rest. And that is how I've made my decision, that this device will be ready with the software upgrade, okay? And that is how we do, that is how we can use this tool. So that is what I have. So the last segment now is questions and ask me anything around IPv6 auditing. So if you have a question, type it into the chat box and if you have questions, type it into the chat box. Can you send us a link to this Google Doc? Yes, everyone. Sami says, yes. At the end of this, when this finishes, you're going to get a feedback form, just so that we can make this better the next time. And at the end of the feedback form, you have the link to this document, and it has obviously all the other links into it. And then within 5 days, you're going to get a copy to this webinar so that you can watch it all over again. Okay. And when you get the link, what you do is that you can't use it. What you need to do is that you need to do a file. You need to do a file, make a copy. Okay. You make a copy, and then you can start modifying it for your own use. You don't need to ask for permission. You just do a file, make a copy, and then you save it on your own, to your own Google Drive, and then you and your team can work on it. I see there's another question here. Is there a question that I'm missing? If you have a question, please type it into the chat room. Let's see. Check Q&A. Okay, my Q&A window seems to be acting up. Okay, Q&A. Good. Good. I see questions in Q&A. From FAOCC, my statistics show that most of you do not have basic IPv6 training, but now taken through IPv6 audit process. One comes before the other. What is AFRINIC plan to train more network admins and system admins in IPv6? That is so I'm going to answer this. That is a very good question. What are we going to do to train more? So like I told you, right now we have trained more than 6,000 engineers from different countries. In fact, I can show you, I have let me do this again. So anyway, to answer your question, we have trained more than 7,000 engineers. And one of the things we realized is that, we just can't, going from country to country, is no longer scalable. So what we are currently we are working some amazing e-learning training. Is that okay? So that what we can do is that for basic levels, how to configure hosts, you can do an e-learning. And then when we come into a country, we can do advanced stuff, like, just transition mechanisms, so just 2 days of security, okay? So that's the plan. And then also, watch out, you're going to be doing more and more webinars and tutorials online like this, okay? Because if you go into a country, we're going to travel for 4 or 5 days, and we're going to train 35 to 40 people. But using webinars and e-learning to do basic foundational training, we can train, every month we can train more than 1,000 people if need be. And then when we travel to a country, so if a country, we see that a country we have in a certain country where, say, 60 people have gone through the foundations course, then what we can do is that we can go and do a live course, face-to-face course in that country, where we do just say transition mechanisms or security or some other advanced topic, okay? FA, I hope that answers your question. Now, as for Steve, is the router the only equipment that is concerned by this audit? That's a good question. No, Steve, right? Remember, I just picked this device as a router. Let's say I had another device that is a firewall. I will simply select firewall here. So like I said, remember one of what's the very first step here? The very first step here is to, you want to list all the devices on your network, and based either upon your network documentation or your network management system, you must identify the device. You must identify the device. Is this device a router or a firewall or a server or a host or a load balancer? Okay. Then once you do that, then you can select based upon, you know, so if my device is a, let's say if my device is a firewall, right? I'll look for the features. I'll look for features that are related to firewalls. Okay, I don't have a firewall specific set here, but I'll look for things that are related to security. And remember, it's a tool. You can always modify the feature set. You can simply come in here, see the features. So I can come and put here firewall feature set. And I list the feature 1 here, feature 1, feature 2, etc. And then it will appear in your audit sheet. As you can see, feature 1, feature 2, it will appear in your feature sheet. Okay. So it is not limited. So remember, and if it's another type of device you think that we have missed, you can also come and put it here. You go to the magic of this tool is in the definitions sheet. If this is, see here, we have categories of devices. Something can be a router, a firewall, a host, or CPE. So if there's a device that you think we missed or you need in your firewall, you can put it here. Okay? Maybe IP phone. You can put an IP phone here as well. And then it will appear in the diagram. Stephen, so there may be other firewalls like MikroTik. That's from Abbas, saying there may be other firewalls like MikroTik. Good question. So remember, someone also said that a device can play multiple roles, because most of the time, your edge router has a firewall feature set. Is that okay? So it is primarily a router, but it also has a firewall feature set. So you can choose to identify as a router, but the most important thing is that when you come to the audit worksheet, it is what you select here that matters. Is that okay? So based upon these questions, what we'll develop in the next version 0.6 of this tool is to identify a firewall feature set and put it here. So thanks very much. So can you please enroll a team from Addis Ababa on the basic IPv6 training? Well, yes. So once we are going to launch the training soon, the online training. Trust me, we are trying to make sure that it is one of the best online trainings that you can attend, you'll find in the space. But when it's launched, we'll send messages to the email mailing list and all of that. But in the meantime, in next week, we're going to have this webinar, but in French. And then every 2 weeks, we're going to have another webinar on another topic for IPv6. So again, that's what at the end of the survey, there's going to be a question. Tell us what else you would like us to cover in the next webinar, okay? And we'll do that. So, if there are no other questions, any other questions? Well, in the absence of any other questions, remember that I know we've covered quite a lot. I mean, you know, that tool is a tool that has taken us almost 6 months to try and get working. So it's still in prototype stage, it's still in prototype. This is in less than 2 hours of work. I mean, there's a lot of things I've put you through. Now, you don't have to, now if you have problems using the tool, we are here to help you. This link on your screen right now, bit.ly the 6deploy.en, right? If you sign up onto it, we can help you step by step how to help with your IPv6 deployment project, okay? Whether it's in auditing, whether it's in helping you get your prefix, whether it's in enabling IPv6 on your core, it is up to you. You do the work, we simply hold your hand. So thank you very much and see you next time.